Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So absolutely delighted to be back down here in Carlsbad with Tomo. Nice to see you, pal.
Good to see you, and how are you?
I'm very, very well.
Excellent.
We're over the moon to be down here doing this with you. We missed it last year.
Yes.
Devastated.
I missed you guys as well.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. So, but we've got a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Last time we were down here, we were looking at sim together, an inertia generator. We were excited to see something that was completely different, new, but I think this is that on steroids. We have a new face to talk about. Let's talk why carbon, why a carbon face, what are the benefits over the titanium face which we've historically used?
Yeah, so there's a lot of layers to that question, and definitely, you know, carbon, we've been working on this for a long time, for about 20 years, and really, I would say our understanding of what it does has evolved over time.
Right.
You know, initially when we looked at it, obviously the weight savings, knowing carbon is strong and light, you know, was a big appeal, and we look at weight savings and things like that everywhere in the golf clubs, right? You know, the crown is already carbon and things like that. But what we wanted to see is, was there a benefit in replacing really the heaviest part of the club, which is the face, with a lighter material and what that could deliver? Right. Now, early on, we obviously realized carbon's not that well suited for impact applications. When you think about it, you don't buy a carbon hammer. You know, like like everywhere where you see carbon in other industries, it's used for sort of structural integrity while keeping lightweight. Not so much for things that are colliding, right? And so that was a big hurdle for us, because obviously you could make it durable, but just making it super thick, which is kind of how other companies had done carbon before, was just make it beefy enough where it's going to hold up. But as we know with golf clubs, it has to have flexibility in the face to provide that ball speed.
Absolutely.
So that was really kind of the $1,000,000 question that we had to answer, was could we make it durable and fast at the same time?
Right.
And that's where we initially focused on sort of making a big face and really offering that forgiveness benefit to the golfer, because obviously the bigger you make a face in a metal face, the more weight you have to add into it, because you have to make it thick enough so it's not over the limit speed. And then you have no discretionary weight for inertia and things like that, right? So that's why driver faces now, when you look at drivers in the market, they're all about the same size face. And nobody wants to go much bigger, because you start giving up things like aero and MOI and things like that. But with carbon, it just opens up all these doors. And so that was kind of the first thing we latched onto, was like, okay, carbon frees up weight. But what we started seeing as we learned more about it was there was a massive speed benefit to carbon as well. And as we started learning more about COR and how the face flexes at impact and with the collision with the ball, we realized that, you know, there's a momentum transfer happening, obviously, from the club in the swing to the golf ball leaving the club face. And there's that nanosecond when the club's on the face where that momentum gets transferred. And what we realized was, if you can make the vibrating surface or the flexing surface lighter, that means you have more weight elsewhere. And that other weight keeps moving through impact. And that's really what's transferring the momentum into the ball. So we can essentially create a more efficient collision. And that was kind of the dream of carbon when we kind of came up with that idea, or thought about how that could work. And then it was all about making that a reality. Can we actually make a club where it holds up, where it does all the other things? It's got to look good, it's got to spin correctly, it's got to sound good, and all those other things had to then come into play. And obviously, if you're going to sell this to consumers, it's got to be durable. And tour players with high swing speed, and players like yourself, it's got to hold up over thousands of shots. And so that's really kind of the key thing with this face. And obviously, like, 2022 is 20-year journey. We're finally making it a reality. Crazy.
Quite amazing to hear that journey, and how there was a little trial in 2013 with the Glory Reserve. I remember seeing that. I remember I was out in Long Island, and in one of the clubs we were at there, they had access to some of the very high-end club, and I remember seeing it again, that kind of the PU in the face. You know, I remember going, wow, that has a different texture. I wonder how, from a friction perspective, that interacts with the golf ball, and what we're going to see from a launch and spin perspective. But what's so great to see is, you know, somebody who's kind of obviously entrenched in Taylormade kind of history in terms of the technology, we still get an inverted cone. Right? So we've not lost that as a technology, we've not discarded that. This is a layering technology on top of that with the carbon.
Correct, so part of this was, obviously, we learned a lot from the Glory Reserve product. And for us, it was a little bit of a kind of a test project, you know, pilot run, if you will, in terms of getting the technology out to the market and getting it out to real consumers. To validate, you know, can we make it in sort of a mass production type of way? Is it going to hold up? Are consumers going to like the sound? Is it going to perform? All those things. Obviously, that product was miles different from this one. And the performance, frankly, at that time wasn't mature. You know, it wasn't better than what titanium was at the time. And even beyond that, if you think about where we went from 2013 through all the M product, we moved the titanium performance forward quite significantly during that time. So part of it for the development of this product was, it was a moving target in a little bit of way, in a sense of, you know, to beat Ty, we had to then add 2, 3, 4, 5 miles an hour. It was like the goal became much bigger, and so that's where the challenge lies with this. But when you compare this now to the Glory Reserve, it's a night and day difference in terms of the performance. The one common thing though is the face PU, and that was a big development that we did on that program to get it to that point, and that really was the platform that started this, and that's really what we're doing to control spin, and you guys have seen it already hitting it. Part of the reason this has such good launch and spin is because of the face texture, the score lines, and the texture between the score lines.
Yeah, I mean that's the first thing. I think the consumer is going to go into a store and they're going to touch it, aren't they? They're going to be drawn to the face, and I think being drawn to the face is what's allowed you guys to maybe modify the top, the kind of the footprint of it, make it a little more understated because you don't need to highlight anything up there now. We're highlight the face.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of it for us was we kind of developed the cosmetic of this driver along with the face technology. So part of it was because it all happens obviously at the same time. We're working on the head at the same time we're working on the face, and obviously we did tons of iterations of the face design. We probably had 100 different designs that we were prototyping. But one of the things we realized pretty early on was if we're going to have a red face with this texture, and obviously we want to highlight where the sweet spot is and really focus the eye there, we can't have a bunch of stuff behind it, because now A, it's too busy, and B, it confuses the golfer in terms of where you're supposed to be looking in terms of alignment and things like that. So it was kind of a nice change for us to really keep it super clean on the top. We obviously went with that satin carbon just to reduce the glare a little bit. But really black, and then super subtle logo execution on the heel.
It's nice, I like that.
We're kind of out here in the range at Lacoste, and we've been kind of some other media outlets doing some testing, and we're hearing the whispers and ripples of he picked up 4 miles an hour, he picked up 5 miles an hour. It's been happening, and that must be exciting, and you must get huge satisfaction out of seeing that and standing, measuring it on TrackMan.
Incredible,
and that type of thing.
Incredible. Honestly, it's one of those where, a lot of times, I think back to all the years I've been at Taylormade. I've been at Taylormade for 15 years. I don't remember being in a situation like this where I'm seeing virtually everyone picking significant ball speed up, and it's such, to your point, it's so satisfying, and obviously knowing all the people back at the office having worked on this product for all this time, to see that reality come to life it's like nothing else. It's incredible.
Cool, isn't it? Well, I mean, maybe share with Tomo your first reaction when you saw it and touched it. And
I think the first thing we were chatting about off camera was we're curious what it was going to sound like. I think I don't know obviously as much of the history as Ian would have, so I was curious. So how does a carbon face work? How does that work relative to using carbon to save weight? So all that stuff was kind of a question mark. But once you started hitting it, I think, to be honest, having hit Sim and Sim 2, I like the sound and feel of it quite a bit better. And one thing I noticed was just off-center hits. To me, I've always been a little bit hesitant to have a Taylormade driver because I tend to miss in the high toe, and it kind of dipped the spin a little bit for me. This has got like a much more stable feel, I think. And the footprint of it, to be honest, it looks a lot like, it's looked for the last couple of years. Same kind of shape, plastic shape. But I got kind of a much more stable feel from it. And obviously, like, the ball speed is as fast as we see, with everything these days.
Yeah, I think, when I watched your presentation on it, when we got that, what really excited me was knowing the technology that had been brought in the last few years that we talked about, the aerodynamics through the inertia generator. Obviously last year, talking about getting the sort of weight back a little bit. Now we've wrestled a little bit of weight savings from the face, so we got the track back. We were excited to get the track back. But we've kind of got all this, ball speed efficiency across the face now and everywhere other than the sweet spot. And we also now have a much larger face. So we're not only faster, we're far more forgiving, and that's a great combo for every golfer at any level.
Absolutely, I mean, the forgiveness aspect of it is huge for us. Obviously, it's great to make a nice driver for you or for DJ or Rory, any of these great players. That's great in itself, but they're going to hit the middle of the face 90% of the time. And so the forgiveness aspect is a little different for them. Now, having said that, when we tested with the tour players, one of the interesting things that we heard feedback on that we didn't necessarily know what to do with it, but they were saying on miss hits, and it's a bit like what you're saying, we're more consistent. And it's one of those things where until you have a club out in the wild, you don't really know what people's perception of miss hits is going to be. Sound-wise, launch and spin. But I remember talking to Adrian out on tour. Fantastic tour rep for us, and works a lot with the best players with Sergio. He works a lot with Rory and guys like that. And his feedback to me was, the spin rate variation was much different than it was on Sim, original Sim, and even Sim 2. It was just a narrower band, and he felt like toe and heel misses. Again, the ball was curving less and things like that. So a lot of times, like that kind of feedback, I don't know what's going to necessarily happen before it's out there.
Sure.
But that's been a really good point. And I think part of it is just the bigger face. And when you're missing it, again, for these players, 5 millimeters, 10 millimeters, pretty close to the middle, you're just farther from the edge of the club, you know, and your launch conditions and the way the face flexes are going to be more similar than maybe older drivers.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, the texture as well, I mean, from a friction standpoint, I mean, there's something in that as well, isn't there? You know, we're looking at the exit point of the golf club relative, or the golf ball relative to your angle of attack. We're trying to, obviously, you know, maintain and kind of keep that nice flat kind of spin rate from it. And, you know, how much went into optimizing that, because carbon as a material offers different challenges in different conditions. You know, it's not the metal face that we were dealing with before. So maybe a little bit of how that came about.
So the face texture aspect of it is really fascinating, because I would say when we started working on this, you know, one of the early realizations was carbon has very low friction. It's a very kind of slippery material. So when you've seen carbon clubs in the past, they've just been like raw carbon on the face. Sometimes they put some little like mini score lines in there, but it's basically just carbon.
Right.
And back in, like, again, the old days, friction wasn't well understood in terms of how it affects launch conditions, because we didn't have launch monitors back in those days, and people didn't even know what to do with it even if you had them. But one of the things we realized was low friction is not good for drivers, because low friction, actually the ball slides up on the face, it actually spins more than a high friction face, which seems a little counterintuitive. Which is why, when you think about it, if you look at drivers now, Thai drivers now, everybody has a really rough face on it. And part of the reason is there's an interesting reaction that happens when the ball hits the face with a driver. It does the same thing as a wedge. It will have friction, it will grip the ball, and it will start the ball spinning. But with a driver with a low lofted club, it will actually have a rubber banding effect. Well, the ball will snap back when it comes off the face, if you have more friction. If the ball just slides up the face, it will just continue spinning normally. Whereas that rougher face will grab the ball and then cause it to sort of spin the other way a little bit. And so a rougher face will take off spin. And as we developed this more, well, one thing we realized, again, we didn't necessarily realize this early on, but as we developed it more, we realized low spin is critical for good performance in a driver. Because if everything else was the same, but every shot had 200 more RPMs, you're not going to be longer. You might have more speed, but you're not going to be longer. So managing the spin was critical. So one of the big developments was this PU face. Full face score lines are there, by the way, for wet conditions.
Oh, wow, okay.
That's going to channel water, because again, the carbon and the PU has different water channeling properties than metal. Metal tends to like have a little bit more dissipation of that water on the face, so you don't need as much scoreline performance, but on these you do. Like a wedge, you want to have as much of that water be able to go away, so you still get some traction in the wet. For the dry condition is where the texture between the scoreline comes into play. And this part was very difficult to engineer. So that one of the key things there was, you can imagine, we have to make a tool for this, right? So it's a metal negative essentially of what that face looks like that the liquid PU gets poured into. And that has to have all the geometry in there. So it's kind of like you're making waffles. You're pouring the waffle mixture into the waffle iron, and it comes out as a negative of whatever the mold was. The problem is, those tools get CNC'd, right? They're made in a CNC machine, but the CNC machine only has a certain resolution of how small they can make features. And this texture has to be so small to be conforming that CNC machines can't do that. So we actually had to get the people who designed the CNC machines to come to our office and actually dial our machine in specifically to create this texture, which is 18 microns high. That's the step of those. I mean, it's like a fraction of the height of a human hair, each of these steps. So all the tools that we used to make this interesting trivia thing here is that we make all those tools in Carlsbad, our head office. The hundreds of tools that we made for this now have all been made in our office, and we send them over to Asia. Because even the best CNC machines, they can't recreate that really, really fine texture that we have on the face. So, but again, that is contributing honestly to about 100 to 200 RPMs lower spin than you would have without it. So it's a significant factor in the performance of the club.
I think this might be the deepest deep dive we've ever done, which is great. And I think that is you know, a reflection on where we've taken, you know, this, and from a technology standpoint, you know, a seismic shift in the way drivers will be built moving forward.
100%.
I think it deserves to kind of have its time here where we talk about it in this level of depth.
It's really cool to hear how you actually made that happen from a manufacturing standpoint. I think people will like hearing that. It's pretty interesting.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, it's going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but we're done making tie faces for drivers.
Yeah.
As a company, we're done. I mean,
that's a big statement.
It's a huge statement, you know, and obviously there'll be things like cascaded product and things like that, but brand new flagship products from Taylormade
will be this.
We'll have carbon faces. Yeah.
Really cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got some more stuff to touch on. I think we kind of cap that one off.
Definitely, that was awesome.
We'll get into the metal woods and beyond, but the 3 new heads. We can't wait to get them in the studios. I can't wait to see people's reaction to it. I mean, it's got to be hard when you do something like this to bite your tongue. Yeah. It's got to wait till the embargoes and all that sort of stuff. We're very, very fortunate to come down and spend time with you and do this type of thing.
For sure, yeah. It's exciting.
It's really exciting. Can't wait for January.
Cool.
Okay, guys. As you can see, as you can, I'm sure, tell, we are excited about this. We can't wait to get it in your hands, get it back to the studio. Dial it in further and really see what we can extract from a performance out this new line.
Yeah, can't wait for that stuff.
Right. Okay, stay tuned for that. We'll see you again soon.